We often think of history as this straight line, right? One event just leads to the next. But Wisconsin's story, well, it's not like that at all. It's more like a stack of layers, with each one pressing down and shaping the next. The past is never really gone. It's always there, just beneath the surface.
There's this fantastic word for it that historian Mark Wyman used, palimpsest. Think of it like an old scroll where someone erased the writing to write something new, but you can still see faint traces of the original text underneath. That's Wisconsin. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to peel back those layers one by one and see what we find.
All right, so where do we start? We've got to go all the way down to the bottom, the foundational layer. This is the story of Wisconsin's first peoples, a history written on the land itself for thousands and thousands of years, long before any Europeans ever set foot there.
And look, the sheer scale of time here is just mind-blowing. We're talking 10,000 BC, when Paleo-Indians were hunting mastodons at the end of the Ice Age. Fast forward thousands of years, and you get the Archaic period and something truly unique, the copper culture. These folks were creating incredible tools from local copper, way ahead of their time. Then, the Woodland period brings in farming, pottery, and those famous effigy mounds. The giant animal-shaped earthworks you can still see today. And then, around 1050 AD, we see the rise of Aztalan in southern Wisconsin. Now, this wasn't just some random village. No way. This was a planned city, a major northern outpost of the huge Mississippian culture based down at Cahokia, near modern-day St. Louis. I mean, they found shells from the Gulf of Mexico there. It just goes to show you it was a key hub in a trade network that stretched across the entire continent.
Okay, so now a brand new layer gets written right on top of everything that came before. And let me tell you, the arrival of Europeans wasn't just another chapter in the story. It was a massive, world-altering event that completely changed the course of the region forever.
So, the year is 1634, and a French explorer named Jean Nicolet lands at what we now call Green Bay. He had a pretty clear to-do list from his bosses in New France. First, make peace between the native tribes. Second, get a profitable fur trade going. And third, and this was the big one everyone was chasing, try to find a shortcut to Asia. And for the next 200 years, Wisconsin's story was all about one thing, the fur trade. Seriously, beaver pelts were basically the currency. The French set up these trading posts, but not really huge settlements, which created this really complex dance of alliances and dependencies with native tribes. Of course, that also sparked major conflicts, like the Fox Wars, which completely redrew the map for a lot of tribes. Then the British show up and take control in 1763, and what do? They double down and expand the trade. It's right around then that we see the first permanent European settler, a guy named Charles de Langlade, set up shop in Green Bay.
So after the American Revolution, you guessed it, a whole new layer starts to form, the American layer. And this period was, well, it was chaotic. A boom time. But this time, the boom wasn't driven by furs. It was driven by a completely different kind of treasure, buried deep in the ground.
And this number really tells the whole story. By the 1840s, little old southwestern Wisconsin was turning out more than half of the entire country's lead. It was an absolute mineral rush for what they called gray gold. And this lead rush, it's exactly where Wisconsin gets its famous nickname, the Badger State. See, thousands of miners flooded in. A lot of them were pros from Cornwall in England. And in the early days, they didn't have houses, so to get through the brutal winters, they just dug tunnels into the hillsides for shelter. They were literally living like badgers. And, well, the name just stuck. With all these new people, the push for statehood got really strong. Now, here's a fascinating bit of trivia. Their first attempt at a constitution was super progressive for the time. I'm talking banning commercial banks and giving property rights to married women. But it was actually rejected for being too radical. So they went back, drafted a more moderate version, and that one passed. On May 29, 1848, Wisconsin officially joined the club as the 30th state.
So after the Civil War, Wisconsin adds yet another layer. This is when it really transforms, moving from a frontier territory to a true agricultural and industrial powerhouse.
And here we see one of the biggest economic shifts in the state's entire history. At first, Wisconsin was the wheat king, producing something like a sixth of the nation's wheat. But there was a huge problem. It was destroying the soil. So facing a potential crisis, farmers, with a lot of help and research from the University of Wisconsin, made a massive pivot to dairy. And by 1915, that switch was total. Wisconsin had become America's dairyland.
But dairy was just one piece of the puzzle. You also had brewing. German immigrants especially turned Milwaukee into the beer capital of the world, building those legendary companies like Pabst, Schlitz, and Miller. And then there was logging. The huge northern forests were basically fueling the growth of America's cities. But that logging boom had a really dark side, leading to one of the deadliest disasters in American history, the Peshtigo Fire in 1871, which tragically killed over 1,200 people. Now, as we hit the 20th century, a new and powerful layer gets added. This one is all about ideas. Wisconsin basically becomes a national laboratory for politics, home to some of the country's most important and most contradictory political movements. And right at the center of this was something called the Wisconsin idea. The concept was actually pretty simple, but it was revolutionary for its time. The university shouldn't just be for students on campus, its research should serve every single person in the state. And this wasn't just talk. Championed by guys like Governor Robert La Follette, it led to real groundbreaking reforms, like the very first state income tax and the first real law for compensating workers who got injured on the job.
But for all its progressive energy, Wisconsin is a state of incredible contrasts. I mean, this is the state that gave America Senator Joseph McCarthy and the anti-communist Red Scare of the 1950s. And yet, just a couple of decades later, another senator from Wisconsin, Gaylord Nelson, founded Earth Day and kicked off the modern environmental movement. Talk about political whiplash. It just shows you how complex the state's identity really is.
And that brings us to the top layer, to right now. In the 21st century, all those older layers we've been talking about, the conflicts, the industries, the big ideas, they're not just ancient history. You can see them everywhere, and they are absolutely shaping the very contentious political reality of Wisconsin today. I mean, just look at the last decade or so. It's been a total political battlefield. You had Governor Scott Walker's Act 10 in 2011, which curbed union rights and led to massive protests. Then he survived a historic recall election. After that came years of bitter fights over gerrymandered legislative maps, which were finally tossed out by the state Supreme Court in 2023. These aren't just random events. They're the latest chapter in that long-running story of ideological struggle in Wisconsin.
So you see, from ancient copper tools to today's political fights, Wisconsin's story really is that palimpsest. Each new era writes its story on top of the old one, but you can always see the echoes of the past shining through. It leaves us with a pretty big question, right? As all these new challenges pop up, what's the next layer of Wisconsin's history going to look like? Hey, if you enjoyed digging through the layers of Wisconsin's history with us, you should definitely check out the other videos in our U.S. State Histories playlist. And for more deep dives just like this one, make sure you subscribe to Notebook Summaries. Thanks so much for watching.